excited to be joined for this second episode of our Rebuild My Church white paper interview series by Msgr James Shea. Msgr is the president of the University of Mary. Msgr, thanks for taking some time to talk with us today.
Brian, it's great to be with you. And I so admire this white paper. You know, I had a chance to see it before it went public and was just very heartened. Of course, I've been an admirer of Amazing Parish for a long time. And so to see all of those ideas kind of in black and white, so thoughtfully fleshed out, was a great encouragement to me.
Well, we really appreciate you giving us some feedback on it and looking at it ahead of time. And we're really excited you're going to join us in Houston at our summit as we continue to unpack the ideas of the white paper as well. It's kind of, in many ways, the framework for our conversations we'll be having down there at the summit. So, you know, maybe a short commercial. Everyone should come to the summit in Houston. It's going to be fantastic. Msgr speaking, lots of great speakers at the summit. But I don't want to spend too much time on commercials today because I really want to get into the meat of the conversation. And really what this white paper is about is trying to re-articulate the charism of Amazing Parish and where it fits within the charism of renewal and evangelization in the church. And you know, I think a lot of leaders in the church today feel like something's happening, that something's moving. There's this kind of quiet revival going on. And it's changing the conversation in many ways from even what it was 5 years ago. I think 5 years ago, we started talking about, you know, something's not working and I can't figure out why. And, you know, my strategies, the things I've been doing in my parish aren't bearing fruit that they used to, or we've been doing the same thing for 30 years and it doesn't bear fruit. So what in this kind of unique moment in the church, we talk about the change of an age and that we're living in a unique moment and a unique change of an age. I would just love to hear your thoughts on kind of where we are up front on not this current moment, but the moment we've been talking about, the end of Christendom and on to the apostolic era of the church. What does it look like for the church to start to really live into this reality of this is a moment that is uniquely different than any other moment we've ever been a part of?
Yeah, you know, the white paper cites Pope Francis in a speech that I think he gave in 2015. But in that speech, he was really just quoting himself. He was the primary author of the Aparecida document back when he was the Archbishop of Buenos Aires, where he said, you know, we're not living in an age of change. That's what people say a lot, that things are changing so quickly. The momentum or the sort of exponential nature of change is staggering, all of these things. But he said, we're not living in an age of change, but in a change of age. Not an era of change, but a change of era. There's some moments in human history when you can draw a bright line between everything that went before and everything that's coming after, and that we're living in such a time. And, you know, this is something that he's not unique, or he was not unique in observing. It's something that's been observed for a long time. I think the white paper also cites Fulton J. Sheen, who's very soon to be beatified, right in St. Louis, where you live,
That's
Brian.
right. Yeah, we're pretty excited about that.
It's tremendously exciting for the church in the United States. But way back in the 1970s, he said we're at the end of Christendom. But, you know, people before that, C.S. Lewis, you know, saw what was happening in his native England. And even before that, kind of when Christendom seemed like it was still pretty thick in the time of St. John Henry Newman, because he understood that ideas tend toward consistency, was gazing out and saying, things are changing. And what's happened is over the course of the last 300 years or so, and especially intently and intensely in the last 30, 35 years, the culture in the West, at least, but I think in a certain sense because of globalization all around the world, but in the West especially, has been very intently ridding itself of its Christian basis. And this has resulted in the first post-Christian civilization in all of history, meaning that, you know, it's the first time where there was once a culture that was deeply Christian in its sentiments, in its foundations, in its instincts, in its, you know, law and governance and culture and customs and all of these things, which now, through a slow but intent and thorough process, has gotten rid of all that, has thrown that out, and has built itself now, or founded itself on a new post-Christian understanding. That's something that's new. And it means that it means that we have a lot of people in our culture who might have grown up Christian, who might have grown up Catholic, who might have been baptized and confirmed, and who think that they've heard the gospel, it has nothing to do with them, and they've had done with it. C.S. Lewis, going back to him, said that evangelization in our time is more like trying to win a cynical divorced person back to a previous bond than winning the heart of a young maiden who's never fallen in love before. And so that's the perplexity of evangelization in our time, that people have been inoculated in a certain sense against the gospel and have imbibed a different gospel altogether at the basis of the way that they see reality. And that makes, of course, evangelization, parish life, the daily work of the church much more complicated. Now, that's sort of a big 30,000-foot view of the change of age.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, obviously in the church we move a little bit slowly sometimes, and we don't respond to these changes very rapidly. And we can think about the church moving in decades, but also parishes and parish offices and religious education programs. Like the church thinks of doctrine in terms of decades and centuries and how it gets defined. And I think religious education programs and parishes are often the same way, right? Like it takes an awful long time to get a new idea or a new thought in there. And the reality is that there's a lot of things in Christendom. People want to say we're not in a Christendom mode anymore. We can't do it the way we did it in Christendom. Christendom wasn't all bad. And I think sometimes we kind of throw those words out there like, oh, well, in Christendom we did it this way. Now we have to do something better. Well, Christendom was a pretty good time for the church in many ways, wasn't it?
Yeah, so let me say first that we should celebrate the fact that sometimes it takes the church a long time to do things and to think things through.
Yeah.
That's one of the sort of virtues. G.K. Chesterton said one of the great things about being a Catholic is that all the mistakes have already been made. And so, as a result, the church brings long experience to the pace at which she considers various questions. Now, that's not to say that sometimes the church doesn't move too slow. And we have seen some catastrophic results in an inability to grasp the change of age in places like Quebec and Belgium and Spain, places that were Ireland, places that were once thoroughly Catholic and which very rapidly have divested themselves of their Catholic basis. But no, I think I would put it stronger than you did, Brian. Christendom was an amazing time. There's a certain sense in which, I remember one time standing in a museum in Paris, and I was looking at a small ivory sculpture of the Blessed Virgin Mary, and it was so intricate in its beauty, the tenderness on her face, the posture of her body, the lilt of her eyes, the way that she was holding her hands was so achingly beautiful. And then I looked, and out of the window of that same museum, I saw the spires of Notre Dame. And I thought, oh my goodness, it's like the apex. It's the highest that human beings have ever come. There's a genius there, not just a genius. John Senior in The Restoration of Christian Culture says that we don't build Gothic cathedrals anymore, not because we don't have the technical skill, but because we don't have the desire, that we've lost that kind of eagerness for God, that quest, that hungersome quest, which is meant to be within us all the time. And so, no, Christendom was an amazing time, and that's not to say that there weren't disadvantages to it. Certainly there were, but the advantages were magnificent and overwhelming. And I suppose if you have to choose the times in which you would live, you would choose a Christendom time. I think a reasonable person would. Here's the problem with that. We don't get to choose the times that we live in. And God has a tremendous amount of wisdom. And so he's put you and me and all the people, the 7 or 8 people who might listen to this podcast, he's put all of us here now. And we need ourselves to embrace that and to realize, no, we're not in Christendom anymore. And so as a result, if we operate in a Christendom mode, when things have shifted to an apostolic mode, when our times and patterns and challenges are much more akin to the early Christians in the first 300 years, making their way bravely, sometimes at the cost of their lives, often at the cost of their lives, against a very powerful, potent, ruling, imaginative vision in the Greco-Roman world, which was inimical in many ways to the gospel and Christian truth, unless we find, or unless we accept and embrace the fact that, yes, we're very much there, that we're very much there in a post-Christian apostolic age, then we're just not going to be very effective. It's not a question of nostalgia. I've said to our students here many times that there's no room for nostalgia in the Christian life. We are where we are now. I think of Joan of Arc. I'm not afraid I was born for this. That's our battle cry in every age. And so, yeah, I think Christendom was great. It's just that it's not here anymore. And so we can play act, but
And I think
yeah.
we're so formed by the world we live in, by the modern kind of moment that we live in, that I think a lot of Christians actually don't think that Christendom would be a good iteration of our current culture. I don't think they think it would be appropriate in many ways sometimes to have this kind of prevailing Christian sentiment through our government and through all of our structures and things like that. Like in some ways, the church has almost become apologetic for being the church because we've started to believe this postmodern idea.
What you just said there brings up a series of complicated questions, because it is the case that in Christendom, when the church and the state, for instance, were collaborating pretty closely together, when Catholic ideals, for instance, and the power of the gospel made its way into constitutions and laws and those kinds of things, there were times and occasions in which abuses took place, and the church didn't understand the proper frontier of civil authority versus religious authority. Give to Caesar what is Caesar, give to God what is God's, and in which corruptions of the state began to reflect poorly upon the church, because it is true that power can have a corrupting influence or effect. And so that does a lot to explain. Like if you go to Quebec, the rapidness with which Quebec abandoned Catholicism wholesale is related historically to the fact that the church once was so powerful that it seasoned every part of every person's life. But no, it's not. Of course, the church is meant to be I think this is Pope St. Paul VI, to be an expert in humanity. We're meant to be an expert in humanity. And the way that Christians live together, the effervescence and the 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 elegance and rightness of Catholic thought and Christian anthropology are such that in a perfect world, yes, you would want in every circumstance for a civilization to be as Christian as possible. The complications or the complexities arise when we don't live up to our own high ideals. And then the charge of hypocrisy comes, and that's a really difficult charge to counter.
Let's talk a little more about like some of the signs of the times of what it means to be in a post-Christian or postmodern society.
Yeah,
I love the study from Christian Smith at Notre Dame, the idea
yeah,
of moralistic therapeutic deism and trying to like really
yeah.
pinpoint and recognize what are some of the fundamental beliefs that we bring with us, what's some of the baggage of the world we bring with us when we go to our parish, when we go to work in renewal in the church. What are some of those other ideas? You can talk about that one or any other you like that you see that really are holding us back from really embracing our identity as a church to be the light of Christ to the world, to go to the corners of the earth and evangelize.
Yeah, so the moralistic therapeutic deism that Christian Smith spoke about is super interesting in that we have to understand that the religion of our time, which is not Christianity, the religion that most people and Ross Douthat, for instance, wrote that very interesting book, Bad Religion: How We Became a Nation of Heretics. He's gesturing in the subtitle there to something which I'm deeply convicted of, that it's not that we've gone back to paganism. It's not that at all. We are in a firmly post-Christian civilization, meaning that it's like a whiskey bottle, thrown out on the beach. There's no good stuff left in it, but if you pick it up, you can still smell it. And so the religion of most people still has Christian overtones and themes to it. And so it still has, it would be impossible if it had not been preceded by kind of a thick Christian culture or civilization. We wouldn't have the religion that we have today. And so there are many things, there are many things that the sentiments or the convictions or the beliefs of people all around us uh, have that simply were borrowed from Christianity and maybe metastasized in a strange way. The one that wasn't is the belief in the fall. That is the fall of humankind. That has been completely rejected. The idea that we need a redeemer, the idea that there's somehow a moral corruption, not out there, not something that we need to be outraged about out in the wide world, but that actually the problem starts in my own heart. As Solzhenitsyn said, that the line between good and evil falls across every human heart, cuts through the middle of every human heart. That's a Christian belief that largely has been rejected. And so we're contending with that lots of people think that what's necessary is just to be a nice person, and that if you do, everything's going to turn out for you in the end, and that God's not really very, that's the deistic part, God's not really very involved in the world, and that religion is for the sake of therapy, that it's not a search for truth. It's something that's meant to help us to cope with the vicissitudes of life. And so we're contending against that. As a result, the work of evangelization is very, very difficult, because you're not converting people out of a simply non-Christian faith into Christianity. You're converting people, or trying to attempt to evangelize or convert people from a pseudo-Christianity to the real thing. And the problem is that the real thing is more difficult to live.
That's right.
You know what I mean? And so it's that's a conundrum.
Isn't that I got to quote something back at you. You've got all these great quotes. Isn't it the Chesterton line, right? There's not 100 people who have, found Christianity, rejected Christianity for what it is, but they tried it and found it difficult in many ways.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm sure I screwed up the line, but
No, that's exactly right. That Christianity hasn't been tried and found wanting. It's been found difficult and not tried.
There it is. That's the one.
Yeah, that's right.
I think I was mixing my Fulton Sheen quote of people who reject what they think the church is.
Yeah. It's good.
I got to get them all in here, Sheen's
much on our mind these days.
He is.
I love it.
He is. And again, in St. Louis, we're thinking about him a lot, gearing up for the fall. So it should be really good. What, in terms of renewal, like it's an interesting moment in the church, because we've had some of these talking points. I think Christendom Apostolic Mission came out, 2019, 2020, right around then, I think.
2020, yeah, during the pandemic.
During the pandemic. Great time for people to get some good reading going there.
Yikes, yeah.
and I think there's a lot of awareness in the leadership of the church in many ways. It's filtering down to the parish level, but there is an awareness in the leadership levels of the church that something has to change and something has to shift about our approach and the way we do ministry, at the parish level, the diocesan level, the way we do formation, even in seminary, I think is a response to that. And all of a sudden, coming out of, the end of COVID and people examining their lives and thinking about, I am a mere mortal. I am immortal. I will die. I've been faced with this, and they've found the promises of the world wanting in many ways. We see this little uptick the last year or two in what folks are calling the quiet revival in many ways. And I wrote a little piece on this recently for Amazing Parish, and there's new wine being poured out in the church in many ways, and our temptation, I think, is going to be to pour it back into the same wineskins. And to keep doing things. Even the last 3 years, we've gotten to this point where we have a mini revival going on. And I hope we recognize it's just that. It's a mini revival. Some of these numbers, I think, are up because we're actually reaching a generation that wasn't sacramentalized in the same way, right? So some of the numbers are up because these are people who would be reverts are now converts, because we actually just didn't go through the motions of baptizing them initially. But in terms of how our approach changes in light of just this little seedling of the new evangelization, the new springtime starting to poke through the ground in some ways. What's our approach now to really build on that momentum? What do we need to be doing in parish life, in the church and ministry to really be aware of the moment that we're living in?
Yeah, so I'm super interested in that. And indeed, I'd like to see your piece that you recently wrote because I've been thinking a lot about it. And, people are prognosticating, and I think sometimes it can be chalked up to a kind of false optimism, or sometimes people can say, well, it's not really happening. We're just hyping ourselves up to get ourselves to feel better or whatever. But I think there is something happening, but it might be different from what we might perceive at first blush. The Christendom book did come out in 2020. And one of the things that we had said in there was that it's important not to be trapped by sociological analysis, that people like Christian Smith and his friends in the world of sociology can make prognostications, and Pew Research can come out with this study and that study, and sometimes that can cause us really to, the rise of the nuns, remember that, NONES, that can cause us really to wring our hands and pull out our hair and say, everything is falling apart, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. But that's to misunderstand the vitality of the church and the Holy Spirit. We're taping this at the very end of the Easter season. Kind of these last 2 weeks are kind of this advent of the Holy Spirit as we're getting ready for Pentecost. And Jesus is talking all over in the gospel again and again about the Holy Spirit, who Gerard Manley Hopkins, remember, says broods over the broken world, the bent world, broods over the bent world. And so I think that what we're seeing is a genuine work of the Holy Spirit, certainly hearts being turned to Christ, the world not keeping its promises, and so young people especially saying, where can I find meaning, purpose? Where can I find happiness or joy in my life? All of these things. And so I think that we are seeing that happening, but the church will need to rise to the occasion. And so one of the questions that I'd be interested in asking, and maybe this podcast isn't the place to do it, Brian, but I'm interested in in how the church can take stock of what the real and apparent needs of those who are converting or reverting, what they really are, what's the attraction, and how can the church, while providing people with what they deeply need, also give them something of what they want? In other words, what's the attraction, and how can we make sure that we're a real home in which they can find that?
Yeah, I think we need to
Um,
reject the sociological analysis on both sides, right? So one is it's doom and gloom and it's been going forever.
yes,
But also we have our
yes,
sociologists within the church who say everything's great, the numbers are on the uptick. And I think we
yes,
should reject
yes,
that
yes,
too. And
yeah,
actually, in a more real sense, look at who is in front of us and what their stories are and how they're coming to us, and really to understand the desires of their heart. So yeah, is there a rejection of, the promise of the political world and what it's done for us? Absolutely. But there's something deeper on the human heart than that stirs them into the church.
yeah,
And if we don't walk with them, if we don't catechize them, if we don't do like the real mystagogy that comes after Easter in many ways of what the church wants for us, then these folks are going to be, it'll be a flash in the pan. They're going to be out there wandering and wanting for more in the world then too. And so we have to really,
yeah.
I think you're right, take stock of what is it that they're looking for. And I think it's thick community in many ways is a big part of what they're looking for, something really meaningful in their
I
life.
I think I think that's definitely the case. Why would you say that the trend seems to be, and maybe this is just an illusion, but it seems to be more among young men? Do you have any sense for that?
I haven't spent too much time on that thought. I think that the culture of the last 10 or 15 years has
Yeah,
disenfranchised young men in many ways, right? So in an
very
effort to
definitely.
promote diversity and equality and all the things that are like, again, like there are truths behind all of these things, but then they feel like their voice doesn't matter. And they feel like they have to almost apologize for who they are sometimes. So I think there's a
Yeah,
reclaiming of like, I do matter. And, I'm not the only thing in the world that matters, but I do matter, and I have a place in the church, just in these timeless truths, that these truths are attractive in many ways. I worry sometimes that, you have the other phenomenon of young men is the Andrew Tate phenomenon, of
yeah,
course.
right.
And so there's a hard line truth, or like they're looking for things that are black and white, and the church offers that. And then there are folks like Andrew Tate who are offering that as well. So I do think we have to be a little cautious sometimes about like you said, unpacking the depths of the human heart there and what it is they're actually wanting, and make sure we don't just morph it into this culture that becomes very black and white. The church says this, I do this, and it lacks any sort of humanity along the way.
Yeah. No, and that wouldn't be good. But I see it on my campus as well.
Yeah, what are your
Of
thoughts
course.
on that? I'd love to hear
Well, the
your
University
answer
of
to
Mary
that
is
question.
it's a particular place in that we're a faithful Catholic college, and so we have
In the
lots of young
Midwest,
men
yeah, North
in the
Dakota is not
Midwest,
normal. Yeah.
and so there's a normalcy to all of that, and so I don't think that we have like an amazing um uh cross section here, or a
Sure.
sample population for the culture writ large, but it is the case that young men are really on a quest for things. And what I've seen in my experience is that's a very, very, very good sign, because there's a certain sense in which religious faith and the practice thereof. I'm thinking here of Willa Cather's greatest Catholic novel, which is not Death Comes for the Archbishop, although that's an incredible, incredible novel. But remember, she has that one, Shadows on the Rock, which indeed is about Quebec. And she has a line in which a missionary priest says, women know these things intuitively, men have to learn everything. And so
Mm.
there's a certain in which you expect that there is a more natural affinity toward questions of faith and their practice among women. And indeed, in the final gasp of Christendom, if you look around, you see that churches get emptied of men, and then there's just women, and then there's just old women. You know what I mean? And so that's how the bottom begins to fall out. But what, in my experience, when for instance, I'll give you just a small example. We've got a campus in Rome. If a group of young men together say, we always have more women over in Rome than men. I don't know why. I think that there's a greater sense of engagement or adventure among the women, or something like that. I can't tell. And we do have a bit more of a population of women here. We'd probably be, not quite 60-40, but something
You
close
and
to that.
everywhere else in the church. Yeah, you're not alone
That's
there.
right. Yeah, and so, but when we get a group of men who go over to Rome and then they come back, they light the campus on fire. Their leadership is such that all boats rise, and so it's a very encouraging trend, because I think that if we do get young men who are engaged and who make a long-term commitment to Catholic life, that's going to bode well for everybody, because the formation and the capturing of the mind, heart, and imagination of young men, um, and catechizing them well and evangelizing them well, gives us an opportunity to really build on a new foundation.
I think so much of the assault of the world traditionally in the last, again, like me growing up, right, the last 30 years has been on men, like visually in many ways, and the epidemic of pornography with the rise of the internet and what that does. And I know that's not an issue that just affects men, but it does feel that the evil one in many ways has targeted young men to try to draw them away with a lot of these other allures that if the church can recapture their imagination, we're going to see a lot of fruit there as well, I think.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I definitely think it's right. And the Holy Spirit is ever new. And so it's wonderful for us to sit on the edge of our seats and see these kinds of things happening in the church. And just because they're not massive and we don't want to overhype them, doesn't mean that they're not real. And God's regenerative power in the
Mm.
midst of the church is magnificent. This is why, and I just want to say a word of encouragement here, like the work of Amazing Parish, which is an important apostle. Like, I think of all the people who are going to join us down in Houston, and all of them will come from different circumstances, and they know we face a stern challenge in the culture in which we live. But what's great is that no matter what we resolve to do, no matter what healing or conviction or strategy or tactics that arise out of our time together down in Houston, no matter what it is, God's going to do the lion's share of the work anyway. In other words, this is just placing ourselves within the arena of grace, such that the work that God intends in his plan, because he has a plan and he's not wringing his hands. You know what I mean? The Lord isn't
Mm-hmm.
like in heaven, I'm really worried that this is going to turn out okay. He's totally got it. You know what I mean? I saw, I think, in the anxiety around a recent election, I saw a map of of the states, you know what I mean? Because everybody was looking at maps that would mark out the electoral college. I don't remember that when if this was 4, 8, or more years ago, but I was so struck by it because it said states where God is still on his throne, and it was all one color.
All of them.
And I
Yeah,
thought,
there you go.
yes, that's right. And so
That's
I think that when we gather in Houston in the work of Amazing Parish, or what we're doing here at the University of Mary, all that we're doing is we're trying to be attentive and docile to whatever it is that the Lord is wanting to unleash in the midst of the world and the church. And we do the best we can according to our lights, you know. And so things like, you know, the white paper for Amazing Parish, our little monograph, our little essay, the Christendom book, this is just an attempt to sort of try our best to capture both the times that we're in, but also the mind of the Lord toward it all, and to encourage each other not to give up, because there's hope all around. And so I think it's not a matter in America, we fall so prey to the silver bullet fallacy, to thinking, oh, you know, I just need to get the right technique. If I do the right dance step, then everything's going to come, or if I work hard enough, then everything's going to come the way that it should. No, it's going to fall apart, but then it'll be rebuilt because of God's mercy.
No, I was going to ask you what your recommendations are for leaders to live in an apostolic mindset and to live in this new moment. That's really what it is, right? It's
Yeah.
educate yourself about the state of the world, where things
Yes.
are, the state of modern
Yes.
man, and then beg the Lord. Just beg the Lord
Yeah.
for renewal and cooperate with what He wants to do. As we start coaching teams on renewal, that's the first. We teach different types of prayer, and it's, you know, we have 3 cultures: unceasing prayer, healthy teamwork, and active discipleship. And everyone knows Amazing Parish for healthy teamwork. We're living in a lot of that lane, but these other 2 are essential. We can't not live these essential cultures. And we teach teams to pray. We say you need personal prayer. If you're not praying on your own, shut it down, forget about it. And you need, you know, spontaneous prayer when someone asks you to pray with them. But then the third one is that intercession and just begging the Lord to pour out grace and renewal in the part of the church that's been entrusted to you. So I think it's really the advice, right? Apostolic minded leaders, what you want to do,
Yeah.
be aware of the world around you, understand the moment you're living in, and be docile and beg the Lord for that renewal.
That's right. And I would only add one thing to it, and that's the importance of doing it in communion with
Yeah.
each other and with God. And so we're begging the Lord for sure, but we're not going it alone. And this is the advantage, I think, of a gathering like what Amazing Parish convenes from time to time, to bring together people who are kind of in the same boat, to you know, in off the battlefield, out of the blowing wind for just a little bit, and to compare notes and to say, oh, here's what works. Oh, here's what I can do. And you come away from that just so deeply encouraged. And that's what we need. Courage. We need
Yeah.
courage in us. We need to be encouraged.
Yeah. Take the heart of the Lord and take it out on the offensive to the world to go and proclaim the good
Yes,
news.
yes, yes. Do you think
Monsignor,
we're going to get
thanks.
more than 7 or 8 listening to us,
I
Brian? What
think
do you
we'll
think?
have dozens of listeners. Absolutely. Should be really
That's good.
good.
And all the angels in heaven too. And that's not a small public.
There you go. Absolutely. Well, no, I really
Yeah.
appreciate you taking the time to join us today in this white paper series. We're so excited to hang out in Houston and hear your wisdom for our audience there. It's going to be just a powerful event, I think, in the life of our ministry. And we pray and beg the Lord for the life of the church. So we're just begging the Lord to pour out the wild action of God on our ministry and all those we serve. And we're just really grateful for you and the friendship you have for us at Amazing Parish.
Well, I think that what you and Tim and the whole family of Amazing Parish are doing is just so vital and wonderful for the church. And I do know some of the pastors and people who have worked with you, and the fruit of this work has just been magnificent. And so I'm happy to return. I think I spoke at an Amazing Parish event a couple of years ago in Phoenix, and this will be my time to come back. And so I'm honored that you'd ask me and put me on stage with other amazing speakers. Isn't Arthur Brooks going to come
Arthur
too?
Brooks is coming. Yeah. Juliana
Yeah.
Stands.
Oh my
We're going to let
goodness.
Tim speak as well, which is, I guess, okay. So it'll be good.
That's great. That's
Yeah, it
good.
should be really
Well,
good.
I'm excited to come. I can't wait. I said to you when we were offline that everybody's dream is North Dakota in February and Houston in August.
Yeah, that's right. Like I said, next year we're going to have our summit on the surface of the sun. Just get a little bit
Yeah, right.
higher. It'll be really good. So,
That's right.
all right, well, thanks. And we'll be praying for your ministry, and we'll see you in August.
God bless you, Brian. God bless
Bless.
all our listeners too.